In the global tech race, the rules have always been clear.
They say that the US innovates, China replicates, and the EU regulates. Let's also not try to shy away from it.
But what if regulation isn't a barrier, but it's your biggest untapped advantage? Meet Sara, co-CEO of Norrsken Foundation, and Willem, founder of Sustainable Public Affairs, who discovered what European climate founders are missing.
And if you're a climate tech challenger, you better have the regulator on your side. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to scale.
For decades, European founders have ignored a crucial growth lever that's been hiding in plain sight.
Regulation has been a long forgotten asset for funders and founders, but we're quickly getting into a new reality.
While tech companies pour millions into Brussels lobbying to protect old models, climate innovators are leaving billions on the table.
It's a huge business case, it's a huge opportunity, and we need the regulator to be paving the way.
That's why Norrsken Foundation has created something revolutionary. A permanent home for climate tech in the most unlikely innovation hub.
Brussels seems like an incredibly dull place, but it is super exciting, and certainly now it's the place to be.
The message is clear. To build world-changing climate tech, you need more than just great technology. You need to rewrite the rules of the game.
Europe is not them, it's us. Everyone should contribute.
Join us for a masterclass on turning regulation from your biggest obstacle into your competitive edge. Sara and Willem on how climate founders can make Brussels their secret weapon, only on EUVC. Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. Make an impact with the bank made for the innovation economy. We always take a relationship-first approach, bringing passion, dedication, and unparalleled international connections to everything we do. Our specialized, flexible solutions for founders, firms, and funds are built on deep expertise that are designed to facilitate growth and enhance your prospects for success. HSBC Innovation Banking, connecting you with what's next.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the European VC podcast. This is, as you know, the show for everything European venture, and we're here to connect and champion the people, ideas, and capital that is shaping the future of European tech. And today's episode sits right at the intersection of two worlds that truly need each other more now than ever. The venture capital and the public policy space. You all know that we're very dedicated to this at EUVC, so I'm excited about doing an episode with the Norrsken Foundation team here today. And I have to tell you, if anyone is leading building the next economy, whether it's in climate, deep tech, or AI, it is our founders and our funders, meaning you guys, our dear VCs that are listening in today. But I really think it's so important that we get into the policy making process as well. And we've seen how in the US that our tech investors or their tech investors and entrepreneurs are becoming deeply embedded in the halls of power. And I think that the European playbook could maybe learn a little bit from that. And to do that, to bring us into that conversation, we've brought Sara Kappelmark and Willem Vriesendorp. And Willem, my big apologies if I'm pronouncing what I'm sure is a Dutch name incorrectly here. But we're bringing them here to talk about the Norrsken House in Brussels that they've set up, which is a new hub designed to bring together Europe's impact community and EU policy makers. And also in this connection, Willem, you're also the founder of Sustainable Public Affairs, who helps the house with programming. And we should, of course, talk about that as well. So to do this, to make everyone better understand who you are, where you come from, let's just get an intro by yourselves instead of by me.
Okay, cool. I'll go first. So I'm Sara. I'm co-CEO globally of Norrsken Foundation. And perhaps like a couple of words just about Norrsken is that it is a non-profit foundation, but that are backing entrepreneurs who are working on solutions to the world's greatest challenges. Founded by Niklas, who was one of the co-founders of Klarna as well. So really we're coming from this heritage of seeing the the power of entrepreneurship, the power of investment is something that can be put to use to solve the world's greatest challenges. And we do that both through investment funds, so have 5 different funds across the world, Norkin VC2 being the largest impact VC fund in Europe, and through different initiatives to like raise awareness about impact entrepreneurship, like podcasts and top lists and so forth. And then also via physical hubs. So we have physical hubs in Stockholm, in Barcelona, in Kigali, and now so happy to be joining forces together with Willem to set up a hub in Brussels to bring together the ecosystem of founders and investors with the policy world of Brussels.
Let me try and also tell a bit about myself. Andreas, thanks for having us. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I think you're spot on. Regulation has been a long forgotten asset, I think, for funders and founders. But we're quickly getting into a new reality. So I'm very excited to be talking about it later on. My excitement comes from the fact that I'm the founder of Sustainable Public Affairs, as you said, which is a public affairs agency. And it is doing what it says it's doing. It's working, it's doing public affairs, but only for cases that advance sustainability. So we only take on cases that we think have a positive impact on the climate, on the environment. We're not big believers in working for incremental innovation. We're big believers in working for challengers. And if you're a climate tech challenger, you better have the regulator on your side. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to scale. But more about that later. So that's what Sustainable Public Affairs is all about. We've been in existence for 5 years. We're working with 25 very kind, very intelligent colleagues, punching way above our weight. I think there's around 30,000 lobbyists in Brussels. And I think we've been, with our 25, able to create and fight for very positive policy outcomes that are business cases. And next to that, next to the consultancy, and that's also why I'm so glad to be here and to be here with my friend Sara, we have set up this Norrsken House, which is really, I think, a landing place maybe for the funders and the founders to be finding their way into Brussels, to be getting engaged, and to be making sure that if you're operating on a regulated market, that you're also able to speak with the regulator, to contribute to the regulation, to break those silos, because you said very rightfully, Andreas, that it feels for many of your listeners, I guess, as a different world, but it really isn't, right? We're all operating on a regulated market. Brussels seems like an incredibly dull place, but it is super exciting, and certainly now it's the place to be. It's and having within Europe, and then within the capital of Europe being Brussels, and within that capital having the Norrsken House is, I think, is extremely exciting. So more about that later, but
maybe I can ask both of you to tell us a bit about what it feels like in Brussels these days in this intersection point between tech and policy. But I imagine also, especially when we're thinking about sustainability, which is, of course, your core area, I imagine that you said it just before, it's the place to be. It's extremely exciting. Everything is moving. Everything is in a flux right now. What has the past 4 months felt like?
Well, yeah, I was hoping you would answer that question, Andreas. And thanks for making my life easy and for just speaking about what I really want, what I really deeply care about, but also I'm passionate about. Listen, it's just great to be here at the moment. I think we see a certain surge of optimism. And dare I say, maybe we are at the beginning of the age of European exceptionalism. I think the stars align. There is just a very solid framework, regulatory framework, that is able to internalize environmental externalities, that is hopefully able to stay the course and give regulatory predictability, that is now operating in an environment where Europe gets also strategic importance. So there's a lot of factors or vectors moving towards Brussels and an opportunity for Europe. So it's an incredibly exciting moment to be here. It's also, as you said in your intro, for public affairs aficionados, an interesting moment to be in Brussels, because we've seen in the US, for example, how powerful alignment of regulation with ventures can be. We've seen it over the last 10 to 20 years. You mentioned tech, right? It was, when you look at Silicon Valley, there was just a perfect alignment between sort of the public regulation, standard-setting bodies, and the development of tech and entrepreneurship. I think now it goes to a next level where sort of some try to become the government. I think we need to have a certain separation of powers, but whatever, no judgment placed. I don't think this is the podcast to play any judgment on that. But what I do think as a public affairs aficionado is that it makes the case for the importance of public affairs. It makes the case for the importance of government affairs. It makes the case for how important regulation is and how not a different world regulation is. So we see a massive influx of interest in public affairs, in regulation, in government. When you look at Europe, the EU, it's a larger internal market than, for example, the US. So there's a lot to play for.
Yeah, just if I should maybe underline what you're saying, in the States, of course, A16 said are one of the hallmark firms, and Mark Andreessen recently said on a podcast that if you'd asked him 10, 15 years ago, what do you think is going to be the largest team, platform team within the A16 set platform? He said, I would never have guessed that it would be what it is today, because right now it's policy. And he also spoke about in that podcast about the importance of policy and the fact that he thinks that when we look at the normal adoption curve for tech, where you normally have societal adoption, technology readiness, and financial readiness to back it, we got to now overlay a fourth vector, which is policy. Are you going to be able to get public and political support for the disruption that you want to bring about? Which I think is a great move to you, Sara, because Norrsken, of course, come with a very strong incentive, so to say, to bring tech forward. I imagine that we can also consider this house an Norrsken equivalent to the increasing tech prominence in the capital in the States.
To bring also the big picture, if you will, of why we're doing this. So I mean, where I'm coming from is that, we live in a world where we know that right now the way our economies are run are overshooting 7 out of 9 planetary boundaries. So there isn't any value chain in the world that would look like it does right now 50 years from now. We will need to totally reinvent our economies. And for that to work and for that to happen fast, we need to have both people who are playing within that playing field, if you will, and people who are regulating it. And it needs to work in tandem. And, if you're playing soccer, everyone who loves soccer, you know that you need to have rules of the game, right? So you have the players, you have the ones setting the rules of the game. But soccer has you update the rules now and then, but it kind of it looks pretty same as it did 100 years ago. But what if it was in an environment where all of a sudden the players were growing wings or developing kangaroo legs, that the players and maybe the playing field of all of a sudden the goalposts start to fly. I mean, then you also need the rules to develop with that. And it also doesn't really work that the rules develop before that. If the soccer judges were what if someone develops wings? Then we need to have these rules. I mean, that becomes silly. But therefore, you need to have the people setting the rules and the people playing within those rules sitting really close together, right? So it can develop in tandem. That right now we are at a place where this tech actually exists. So we need to evolve our rules to make the best out of it and make sure that we avoid the potential harms of it, or have a conversation how to use this jointly best in the best way, and what things that may have been good regulation in the past, but now it's completely obsolete because the people and the companies playing within it have evolved beyond it.
if we could just get super concrete, the Norrsken House in Brussels, how do you use it? How can founders use it? How can VCs use it? Is it a place for everyone, or is this Norrsken backing their own agenda there? And we're all happy about that, but it's not for the rest of us.
No, thank you for asking that. And it's really that we've decided that right now, like Norrsken as an organization is not going to push any specific policy issue through this house. This is really, we want to create a platform for as many values-aligned people and founders and investors as possible to like lower the barrier for getting into that conversation. Because I think that like, you know, while there are some things that are cross-cutting, we just have so much respect for that. Yeah, like what the specific policy updates need to be if you're in like electric vehicles or green cement or novel foods, like that will differ. And we need to have people who work in those specific fields and are experts in their specific realities to come closer to policymakers on a broad scale. So the more we can make that happen, the better. So really, with your amazing group of listeners, the best thing that could happen after this, Andreas, is my mailbox is just flooded with people who want to join this movement and have ideas for what they would like to do and how we can work together. That is really the best thing that could happen.
Maybe I can just add to that a little bit also from a Brussels perspective, Andreas, and how Sara and the rest of my friends at Norrsken thought about this is really sort of two-way street. First off, we want to bring those funders and the founders to Brussels to give input to the regulation. All right, there's, for example, you wanted to get very concrete, in a couple of months from now, the European Union will come up, or the European Commission will come up with a policy on startups and scale-ups. It's called EU Startup and Scale-up Strategy. We don't want it to happen that this is only crafted by people that are sitting behind their desk and have never been leading a venture or have never been inventing anything. Not to their disdain, but I think a collaboration, bring in reality, bring in successful funders and founders into this discussion, inputting in what a strategy for startups and scale-ups could look like. I think that's incredibly useful. And the second thing, so that's inbound, right? We want to bring the world into Brussels. The other thing that I think is almost equally important is what you've been hinting at the beginning, is bringing the Brussels sort of ecosystem into the funders and founders ecosystem. For a lot of time, I've been seeing that it's only after, I don't know, a Series B or whatever that people start to seriously look at regulation. If you're an entrepreneur, certainly an entrepreneur in climate tech, you're gonna have to factor in regulation at a much earlier stage. Is it gonna be a maker or is it gonna be a breaker for your business case? That stays all along your investment and startup journey. That doesn't really change. If you're making low carbon cement, you have to know that the emission trading scheme is working for you, that the price on conventional cement is going to increase, that your business case is hence going to be improved. You need to be in the know of that. And we hope also with this Norrsken House, which is really a policy house, right? It's a bit different from the other houses. It's really about the policy people. It's a powerhouse. It's about power dynamics. It's about Brussels. It's about regulation. How can we bring that knowledge into the houses in Stockholm? How can we bring that knowledge into the houses in Barcelona, where these founders are developing brilliant ideas? But how can we make sure that they put regulation earlier on as a factor on their P&L? I think that is the sort of outbound effect of the Norrsken House. So I think it's a two-way street. That's the way I see it, at least, and I hope that's helpful in people's understanding.
So venture and startup land is defined by being small. How does a VC firm with 2 partners and a few employees, or a startup that's seed stage, how do we most effectively get engaged in policy?
Love that. I mean, first of all, the like humbleness to that. I mean, as you say, like being a founders already before policy, like being a Swiss Army knife, that you're head of sale, you're head of fundraising, you're head of product, you're head of HR, so like full respect for that. It is a lot already, and I think that is exactly why we think that like individual startups, we have a better chance of cracking that puzzle if we try to do this together. If it's not like every individual startups needing to crack it on their own, then humbleness to that, exactly what that would look like, and like what type of interventions and what type of connections. That is like we're sometimes call ourselves like a startup among the startups. That's what we're going to iterate on for the coming years, to say that how do we, what type of meeting places, what type of knowledge sharing is it that in the end was a good use of time.
I think we also need to be super straight about this, Andreas, is that if you want to do a really tailor-made, in-depth public affairs strategy, that requires a lot of work, right? It's just making sure that you fully understand the regulation, go very deep into the details of the business case, see where that world of the founders meet the regulatory world, see what the policy levers are that you can influence, how you can make amendments, how you find the right people to talk to. It's an amazingly interesting game, but it requires a lot of footwork. So we also don't pretend with Norrsken House that we're redoing that for everyone. It's a place of connection. It's a place of awareness raising. It's a place of public affairs 1.0. It's a place where we can actually, as you said in the beginning, really make sure that this is not another world, right? That it is just the other side of the same coin of entrepreneurship. I think if we already get to that stage, we have won a lot, because it's completely absent. And I'm seeing it from here. The interest, I founded Sustainable Public Affairs 5 years ago. It has grown quite quickly, but I now foresee a huge surge in work because people now finally understand that this is not a different world. And there, I think the platform, and that's what Norrsken House really is, the platform, the physical platform for that is the Norrsken House. It's the landing place really for, we call it the permanent representation of sustainability and entrepreneurship to the EU, right? So it's when you have the European Union, you don't talk about embassies, but permanent representation. So Sweden has a permanent representation, but also very small island states. Everyone has a permanent representation. But the cause for entrepreneurship and sustainability didn't have, up till now, a permanent representation. So we are that, and everyone is welcome. Everyone, as Sara said it, can join the movement, because we're on to something exciting, something new, and it comes at the right time.
You just said everyone is welcome. Norrsken is known for the sustainability side. Is this house for sustainability, or will it be for tech in general?
It's an interesting question. And I think we've been super focused on saving humanity and going green, etc. But ultimately, it's also about just doing more with less, right? Being smarter, being more resource efficient. And I think that it comes pretty much to the fore in what maybe your readers should have a summary of if they want to get to know what Brussels is all about these days. It's called the Clean Industrial Deal, which is a key policy piece that's sort of an IKEA catalog of all the initiatives that are upcoming in the next 5 years. They also hammer hard on, for example, things like circular economy. Well, everyone thought it was dead. They don't do that because they're just tree huggers and because green is great, although it's great to be hugging a tree. But it is what they say about it. It's key to maximizing the EU's limited resources, reducing dependency, and enhancing resilience. I think that is a mindset shift that we've seen over the last, year or so. It's about being smart, doing more with less. And I think it's a huge opportunity, Andreas, if other big economies deprioritize their attention to this. That's an opportunity we should not miss. So I think also when I say join in the movement, it's everyone that are your listeners, everyone in the ecosystem of Norrsken can help the EU to gain enough confidence to stay the course and to not change and to keep the predictability and the climate goals and the decarbonization objectives and the fact that it says that the EU wants to become a world leader on the circular economy by 2030. Those milestones are incredibly important for your ecosystem, Andreas, for the people that want to get certainty on what they put their money at. To conclude, maybe they say that the US innovates, China replicates, and the EU regulates. Let's also not try to shy away from that. Let's live up to that honor. Let's try and do it well. Let's try and stay the course. Let's do what we're good at, because we're going to be making all the great stuff that the rest of the world wants, whether you are a climate believer or not, I think it's going to be very, very bipartisan if you frame it around the edges of just doing more with less, being smarter about things, being more resource efficient. So I just wanted to also nuance a bit the whole sort of thing about doing this only for the sake of being seen as righteous, etc., etc. This is it's a huge business case. It's a huge opportunity. And we need the regulator to be paving the way for us, because humanity is smart enough to come up with the solutions. But we all know a bit of behavioral psychology, and sometimes it's difficult to get attention and to get enough momentum behind the movement, because we are in behavioral psychology. Anyone that has read Daniel Kahneman knows that people are loss averse, right? It's the prospect theory, and that very much holds true for Brussels. There's a lot of money going into lobbies of people that stand to lose, right? Because people are loss averse. So if you are on top of an industry, but legislation comes in that makes that you're less profitable, you drum up a lot of resources in order to make sure that legislation stays the same or doesn't become more ambitious, so that you can keep on being profitable. But if you are in a position where you need the legislation in order to gain, then the appetite for bringing on more resources for public affairs is rather limited. And I feel that is now currently changing a bit. People see that there's a lot of gain that they're potentially missing, and therefore I think resources for public affairs will be ramped up. And I think also last thing, and then I'll stop talking, but the last thing that I see is that currently we are seeing numbers out there that are just going through the roof. 800 billion for defense overnight. We need to see how much of that is fresh money, right? And we need to take it with a pinch of salt. But it is numbers that we haven't seen before. Things like really Zeitenwende moments, Germany just opening up its possibility or its willingness to be borrowing on capital markets, 500 billion for defense and transport, by the way, and infrastructure that people often forget. I think those are also increasing the odds of being active in Brussels, because there's just a lot to play for.
I'd love to ask you both a question. This is something that I am pioneering a bit, spearheading, trying to get people behind. And I know it's probably a little bit divisive for many. What I see is that we've actually been okay at getting involved in public policy and best practice making, and we have a lot of reports that come out with good intentions and good guidelines as to how to create a better ecosystem for startups and for the funding environment and so on. What I have seen having arisen in the States is that the VCs have very much, and the tech founders have very much openly picked a side, and they're very much lean into not just policy, but also politics. That is not something I've seen in Europe from many. And I think, honestly, that we have to pick sides. Some places it's going to be one party, another place is going to be another party. I don't really care, but I think, which side VC X or VC Z picks. But I think that the fact that you do go out and support publicly the candidates that further your case will have important ripple effects into the policy area as well. But I don't think everything is done behind the lines anymore. I really think that it is important that we get behind publicly the politicians that are speaking our case?
Our assumption in Norrsken, I mean, let's see how it plays out, is that we are actively non-partisan. We have really, because we've thought that well, to some extent you can say that we're political, right? Because the things that we're driving, as you said, like we're working for a world where humanity thrives within planetary boundaries, and there is a lot of politics within that. But I think that aspiration, we don't think that it kind of cuts in the same way as the current parties cut
No, it does
across.
not.
And
I
we
agree.
think that
In many ways it does not, but in some ways it does.
in some ways it does, but in some ways it doesn't. And we rather think that, well, it's super interesting that with the cuts of party lines, if you can have a broad tent conversation of people coming with slightly different takes on what is important on that journey, because we need to find solutions that have collaborative advantages. We cannot create the Europe that only works for a subsegment of people, right? We need to innovate in a way that creates a better society for not just the voters of Party X, but for us all. And that is the kind of, we think that so far we've seen that, well, most parties have something to contribute to that journey, and that it's good that we can bring that conversation to life. That will, what are the exact ways that your party would like to contribute to this future? So far, we've rather seen that it's been a benefit of being broad. I spoke to a person a while back who was a non-political actor within the Swedish government, and he was like, "Yeah, it's good with Norrsken. Everyone likes you a bit, and everyone hates you a bit across the party lines, because we don't fully agree with anyone, but we also don't fully disagree with anyone, and have really seen benefits with collaborating across party lines."
Any take, Willem? Are you going to get into the into the phrase?
Of course, as a co-founder of the Norrsken House in Brussels, I very much agree with Sara. I have many other hats. And if I put up the head of sustainable public affairs, I'm completely in agreement with you, Andreas. I think we need to make sure that we rally behind the people that we think are doing what we think is needed. So sustainable public affairs is really about trying to, I think, help is the right word. So help the progressive pockets in lawmaking, be it in the European Parliament and the European Commission, with the right examples, right? So if you are willing to, I don't know, drive an agenda that phases out PFAS out of batteries, lithium-ion batteries, well, we'll get you an example of a venture that's able to make lithium-ion batteries without PFAS. Okay, so, and of course, such a venture will need such regulation in order to come onto the market. Otherwise, nobody will change. Value change won't change, right? People are accustomed to things work. Why would they? So I think we try to arm the progressive pockets in the European Parliament and in the European Commission with examples as to why making more climate ambitious legislation is actually very good and essential for the business case of what we call sustainable frontrunners. So we do focus a lot on helping those lawmakers to stand out and do their work better.
Sara, if I can ask you the same question in a different way, because it's one thing rallying behind a specific party, and I get that is something that's very difficult and can be very hard, dangerous. I do, if I should just interject one thing on that, I would say, well, the fact that we have the media calling the tech ecosystem around Trump and the Trump administration the tech oligarchs, and they're saying that they've almost built the administration, I think, in one way, you can definitely look at it and say, I don't like that, because you don't agree with them. But you can definitely see how it has shifted the landscape completely. And assuming that we like tech and we think that the perspective that the tech crowd brings to how we further and build the world, I think the natural next conclusion would be, well, isn't that a better world than having it be museum directors and so on that are that are members of parliament? And for that reason, I think that there is a lot of importance in being vocal and actually going into politics. And sometimes you then have to pick a candidate where you don't agree with everything, but if you lean heavily, you might be able to form a lot. I won't ask you to comment on that. What I would ask you to comment on, though, is VCs and tech founders are role models in today's society. Everyone looks to them. They are invited on all kinds of different talk shows and they're listened to in the media. They're big personalities. They typically are also very good on social media. That is, of course, a skill set and a set of assets that is incredibly powerful when it comes to driving forward public opinion. So even though you might not get behind a specific party, this leaning into taking a public stance on what is actually not just policy. So it's not just this percentage of, whatever detailed regulation we think is great. It's not just the big work behind the scenes, but it's also being very public about driving forward an agenda. How do you think about that at Norrsken?
I mean, one of the reasons why we want to do this is because I think that, sometimes when the debate happens on a social media format, it so easily gets so simplified that it gets silly. It becomes regulation, over regulations versus no regulation. No one wants no regulation, right? I mean, we all want to have a working, societies. I think that we want to get deeper into that so that we don't spread those type of just silly memes, if you will. And then I think that another dimension of what you were onto is that I think that we in Europe have a really great heritage of having business building that takes societal responsibility. And I think that is important. We've never really bought into this super simplistic view of that the way that businesses contribute to society is that, you only optimize shareholder value and that's it. Because yes, of course, if you're a business, you need to make your P&L work. You're there to if you're building something that is important, you're there to grow. Yes, that is part of the game, but you also have moral obligations as a business. And I think that is really something to hold on to, because I think that is when we can get a constructive dialogue between the investor and startup community and the policy community. Because I mean, if all policymakers were just, narcissistic Machiavellians who were only looking to grab tax money, then we wouldn't trust them, right? And if all business builders were only, psychopaths who were only looking to exploit the world for their own personal profits, then yeah, if I was a regulator, I would heavily overregulate them. But that is not the community I'm seeing. I'm seeing, people who've left their super high paying jobs because they saw a real challenge in the world. They say, well, I can build something that can address this. And it's when we can get into that space of saying that, well, yeah, there's some assholes in both policy and in investment and in startup building. Most of us are people who are have some friends that we need to adhere to, but also really trying to do our best to contribute to the world, and let's lean into solving things together.
I actually think you're 100% correct with what you said there, because the magic that is in the hands of tech founders and tech VCs is exactly that. We do most often have God on our side, progress on our side. And that is also why I think it's so important that we get public, because I think that is our strongest asset. We will never outbeat big oil when it comes to having most lobbyists in Brussels. But big oil will never be able to go on LinkedIn or go on Twitter or go on anywhere and scream from the rooftops about their case, because everyone will look at them and say, yeah, good on you. We know what you're driving at. Whereas I think that most founders actually come with a very high integrity and trust.
We all, what I now see and read and feel is we're all happy to be here, right, in Europe. It's a great place to be. Let's also just pause and be super thankful for where we are. There's no war. We can eat. We have good wine. We have forests. We can go out hiking. People are healthy. People are happy. Good social systems, high social mobility. In most countries, you can make it within one generation. So I think we have just a lot to be grateful for. And Europe has given us a lot. And I also think it's time for those funders and founders to just step up the plate and just help to conserve and to keep those values and that continent that we're living in. And I think that we shouldn't take that for granted. So I think if you say what those people with a huge reach can do, there's one thing about whining why some people with an agenda do that and are extremely successful about it. But I believe in the power of individuals and optimism, and we shouldn't be whining about what's going wrong. That's just to reassert what we can do right. I think in that sense, sometimes when I'm out running, I have this dream of some sort of a team Europe, right? Sort of a league of extraordinary funders and founders that can come to the rescue, that can come to Brussels, that can come and help save the day and just give back to the country that they come from and for the values that they believe in. And that can help the bureaucrats in crafting meaningful legislation that's going to warp new ventures into being. And I think Europe is not them, right? It's not those folks in Brussels. It's us, okay? And everyone should contribute. And that can be done through Norrsken House. That can be done with sustainable public affairs. It can be done in your free time. Join your local, community council, whatever. But Europe is not them. It's us, and we're responsible for keeping it cool. And I think that just needs to be out there.
I want to close the podcast on that very strong statement, because I think we could talk for another 10 minutes because we have that in the calendar. But I do think that this is the closing line that will close the podcast at the most important time. So let's all hearken that call. Let's go and get involved. Thank you, Sara. Thank you, Willem, for joining me today.
Thanks.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.